We've got the Ravens going up against the Bengals this weekend. This game is going to be in Cincinnati. Who do you think is going to win this one and why?
So, I mean, I don't want to go out and say that it's going to be a blatant Cincinnati favoritism, right? I'm not going to go say that it's 100% going to be the Bengals because the Ravens defense, since acquiring Roquan Smith, has been absolutely lights out. Now, they don't have the greatest record in that time because I believe in that period they've lost 2 games, 2 or 3 games actually, because I cannot remember when they actually acquired him. But just looking back at their last 6, the Broncos game, they won 10-9, 9 points. The next game against Pittsburgh, 16-14, they got to win 14 points. The next game, they lost 13-3, but the defense held Cleveland at 13 points. They go and beat the Falcons 2 weeks ago, 17-9, once again, single digits. And then last week, they lose to the Steelers in a nail biter, but again, 16 points. This Ravens defense has been absolutely incredible. And when you go and look at games prior to the games that I'm talking about, there have been multiple 20-point games, 30-point games that the defense was allowing. And Roquan Smith, for whatever reason, has just added a different dimension, a different kind of confidence, a different kind of dimension to the defense, and it's just kind of sparked them to hold it down since they've had multiple backup quarterbacks have to come in. Because if I'm not mistaken, Tyler Huntley got hurt one game and someone else had to come in, and they were on their third string quarterback. Now, granted, Huntley has been playing with an injury as well, so I think that that is going to be a bigger reason why I think Cincinnati will win. It's not going to be a blowout. I do have Cincinnati because I do believe that obviously Joe Burrow is 10 times better than anybody on this roster. I mean, the only one that would rival him would be Lamar Jackson, and that's just straight athleticism. But quarterback to quarterback, blow for blow, I'm going with Joe Burrow, even if Lamar was here. So I got Lamar. Excuse me. Wow. Excuse me. Wow. I have Joe, and I have the Bengals, and I think that this is going to be an entertaining game because, of course, it's a divisional game. It's a rematch from the game that was earlier in the year. Obviously, we don't have the Lamar versus Joe Burrow showdown, but for whatever reason, Joe always finds a way to dial it up against this team, man. Joe, he may start slow, but he finishes strong. The dynamic trio, the three-headed monster that is T. Higgins, Boyd, and Chase, they just seem to be unguardable in certain cases. And of course, Hayden Hurst is there. Joe Mixon is there. With Lyle Collins tearing his ACL a few weeks ago, and us not being able to see how this offensive line is going to adapt since last week's game or earlier this week on the Monday night game got canceled. I think that is going to be a big point of emphasis to watch because that's Joe's blind side. And that is pivotal for the success of this team because we've talked about it 100 times. If Joe is upright, the Bengals can beat most teams. If he's on his back consistently, they're not going to have any time, and I think Baltimore would take advantage of that. So I think this one will be a close game for the sheer factors that I had mentioned with Baltimore's defense playing better, Joe missing a left tackle, and then, of course, the week being a little awkward for Cincinnati with everything that's transpired with the whole DeMar Hamlin situation. So I have this game going really tight. I think this might be a 24-21 game victory. I think that Cincinnati wins a nail biter, and hopefully this would solidify them a home game.
Yeah, Kev, I'm with you on this one as well. I have the Bengals winning this one. I do think this is going to be a competitive game, and it's like you outlined. This Baltimore defense has been no joke. I know that the Ravens have gone through some pretty major issues on the offensive side of the ball, and it has to do with just not having Lamar in the fold. But I really do think that this defense has stepped up to the occasion, and they're keeping these games competitive. And look, I mean, the Ravens are coming off a really tough loss against the Steelers last week. It was a game that they had in their control until Kenny Pickett threw the game-winning touchdown to Najee Harris, and I imagine that they're trying to get back into some sort of rhythm as they transition into the playoffs. But I think when it comes to the Bengals, I think the Bengals just have too much firepower for the Ravens to handle. And I think when it comes to the Ravens offense, I just don't see them putting up enough points against the Bengals to go toe to toe with them. So I do have the Bengals winning this one. Now, when it comes to the Bengals, like I kind of said a couple minutes ago in the lead up, we only saw a portion of them play against the Bills on that Monday night game a couple days ago. And I will say, even though that they didn't play the full 60 minutes in that game, like Kev said, based on the DeMar Hamlin situation that took place, the Bengals looked like they had it rolling. And granted, they only played about, I don't even think they played a full 10 minutes of the first quarter, But seeing the type of success that they had against that Bills defense early on, granted it didn't continue because they only played for, like I said, about 10 minutes in the first quarter. It really went to go to show that I think the Bengals would have been able to maintain that type of consistency where they would have really given the Bills a legitimate run for their money. And with the Bills having the defense that they have, I think the Bengals could have potentially put up 25, maybe even around 30 points had they played the entirety of the game in that scenario. But, you know, it's a different situation right now, and the Bengals have to get back into some sort of rhythm. And going up against the Ravens, I do believe that, the Ravens give them a specific challenge simply just because this is a divisional rival that they have to go up against twice a year. But I think the Bengals are going to be able to readjust based off of what happened this past week on that Monday night game. And I think that they'll be able to essentially continue the type of role that they've been on for the last 2 months. The Bengals have been one of the hottest teams in the NFL. Joe Burrow has been playing lights out in the second half of the year. And it's really been just based on the offense just making the plays that need to be made consistently game in and game out. And then the defense coming up with some crucial stops or some crucial sacks and even forcing a turnover or two. And I think just based off of the inadequate play from the Ravens offense the last couple weeks, I think the Bengals will win this one relatively handily. I just think that this Bengals defense, when they're playing up to snuff, this defense is no joke. And I think going up against the Ravens offense, which, Kev, let me just outline some of the Ravens point totals from the last couple weeks. They scored 13 points against the Steelers. They scored 17 points against the Falcons. They scored 3 points against the Browns, 16 against the Steelers in the first matchup between Pittsburgh, and then they scored 10 against the Broncos. So in no game from the first week of December up until now have the Ravens scored more than 20 points. Obviously, I know the Ravens have injury issues. I'm fully aware of that. But I don't believe that they'll be able to continue the defensive performances that they've been having the last month or so against the Bengals. I just think the Bengals have too much to work with. And I think when this game is final, I think the Bengals win this one by, I'd say probably around like 24-10. I just don't think the Ravens are going to score enough points to stay competitive in this game. And the Bengals may get a turnover or two, meaning that the Ravens defense gets a turnover or two from Joe Burrow, just because Joe has a tendency to turn the ball over here and there. I just don't think it's going to be enough, and I don't think that the Ravens are going to force those Bengals turnovers into points. So as far as I see it, I think the Bengals win this one relatively comfortably, and who knows? I think the Bengals could be set up for a pretty nice playoff run, very similar to last year, except this year they have really just finished out the season extremely well, despite getting off to a really rocky start at the beginning of the year. But when it comes to this game between the Bengals and the Ravens, I got the Bengals all day in this one.